Hello again. And I thought that we could start with some meditation in order to get more familiar with what we've learned so far in this course on the 4 establishments of mindfulness. So again, the 4 establishments of mindfulness are developing mindfulness with regard to 4 objects: body, feelings, mind, and all phenomena. And we're still on the first of those, the body. There's actually a number of different ways of practicing mindfulness with regard to the body. The first one is the breath. So that's as far as we've gone now. But even within that, there's different ways of practicing mindfulness with regard to the breath. So I thought in this meditation we could gradually go through the different ways of practicing mindfulness with the breath explained by the Buddha. Just try to get more experience of those. So, sit comfortably, trying to keep your back straight, but don't hunch your shoulders, let them drop and be relaxed. And if you're feeling sleepy and you think there's a chance you might fall asleep during the meditation, we don't want that to happen. So it's helpful to not close your eyes all the way, but leave them open a little bit and have your eyes looking down onto whatever is in front of you. That way there's some light coming into your eyes, and the light can help keep your mind awake and alert during the meditation. And let's generate a positive motivation for doing the meditation and also learning in this class. So we are learning the teachings given by the Buddha. And when the Buddha gave these teachings, he did so with universal compassion. He cares about all living beings, doesn't exclude anyone from his concern, his wish to help. So he gave these teachings to help us and all other living beings be free of suffering and its causes, and to find genuine peace, happiness, freedom, and eventually enlightenment. So when we learn and meditate on the Buddha's teachings, it's good if we can try to have a similar attitude in our own minds, that we're doing this not just for our own benefit, but to be able to bring benefit to others. So just spend a few moments contemplating that and bring into your mind, into your heart, whatever altruistic motivation you're comfortable with as your reason for doing this meditation. And it's also good to make the determination to do the best you can to stay focused on the meditation, not let your mind wander away and get caught up in other things, other thoughts. And if that does happen, sometimes we can't control our mind, so it does wander away and get lost in thoughts. So when you notice that has happened, to let go of the other thought the other mental activity, and bring your awareness back to the meditation. In particular, we're going to meditate on the breathing. So start by turning your attention to the breath, to your breathing, and make that the main object that you focus your mind on. Just be aware of each inhalation of the breath and each exhalation of the breath, as well as the pauses in between one breath and another, in between each inhalation and exhalation. Don't let your mind run away just because there's a little break in your breathing. So stay with the breathing, and when you notice your mind has wandered away to something other than the breath, as soon as you notice that, let go of that other object. Bring your mind back to the breath. So doing this involves mindfulness. Mindfulness is the mental factor that enables the mind to remember a familiar object, in this case the breathing, and to remember it in a continuous way, one moment after another, without forgetting it and being distracted to other things. So whenever your mind is focusing on the breath, staying with the breath, then that shows mindfulness is present. It's operating, doing its job. So the Buddha also advised us to notice if a breath is short or long. Knowing if we're breathing in short, we're breathing out short, we're breathing in long, we're breathing out long. See if you can incorporate that kind of awareness, which means we're paying a bit closer attention to our breathing so that we can notice if it's short or long. And doing this involves vigilance, the mental factor that is aware of what is happening in our body and mind. So you don't deliberately make your breath shorter or longer. You just allow your body to breathe in its natural way. But sometimes it does breathe in a longer way, sometimes in a shorter way. So just try to open your awareness to that. Be aware if the breath is short or long. And then the Buddha added some other instructions, which are to experience the whole body, one meaning of which is expanding our awareness so that we experience all the different parts of the body, not just the breathing. We continue to be aware of the breath flowing in and out, but now we experience the breath within the context of our entire body. So see if you can try that, and again, stay focused on the breath, stay focused on the body, bring it back, bring your mind back whenever it does wander away. But here we are expanding our awareness to include the entire body. The next part of the instructions are to calm the body. And this is something that probably happens naturally when we sit still and pay attention to our breathing and pay attention to the rest of our body, the entire body. So this should have a naturally calming effect on our body as well as on our mind. So just allow the calming experience to take place in your body becoming more and more calm and peaceful, and see if there's a corresponding effect on your mind. As the body becomes more calm, less agitated, then does that enable your mind to become more calm and less agitated? Sorry if I startled anybody. I never know how it's going to sound when I ring the bell. So, so there's different points in the meditation taught by the Buddha. We start with just being aware of the breath coming in and going out, bringing the mind back when it wanders away. And then the second point is being aware if the breath is short or long. So that makes our mind a bit more alert, more focused on what's happening. Then the next part is to experience the whole body. And that could mean, there's different interpretations. One meaning is the whole of our body, all the different parts of our body, while still being aware of the breath. So the mind is still focused, centered on the breathing coming in and going out. But we also let our experience expand so that we feel the whole body. Buddha didn't say specifically what to do about that, but just to have that awareness. Another interpretation of whole body is the whole body of the breathing, which means you're really paying close attention to each breath, the whole duration of the inhalation, the whole duration of the exhalation of the breath. So really staying very finely focused on that. And Joseph Goldstein said either interpretation is fine. And you could even adjust your practice. If your mind is sleepy, sluggish, then it could be helpful to pay attention to the whole body. But if your mind is very scattered or distracted, difficult to stay focused, then it could be helpful to focus on the whole body of the breath. Just really paying close attention to the breath coming in and going out. So the Buddha himself didn't say what he meant by whole body. That's why different commentators of the past and the present offer their interpretation of that. And so we can choose which interpretation works better for us. And then the last point is calming the body. I mean, I do tend to think the whole body does refer to literally the whole body, because later in the instructions we are advised to pay attention to things that are happening in our body, changes that are happening in our body moment by moment, like a sensation will arise in a certain part of the body, and we observe that arising and then passing. And so in that way, we are learning more about impermanence, gaining more insight into impermanence, which is one of the main purposes of this meditation. It's to gain insight into the reality of things, the nature of things, how they exist, starting with impermanence. So if the point is to become aware of the impermanence of the entire body, it does make sense to understand that we are meant to expand our awareness to the entire body rather than just the breath. But I was thinking, this is just my own thought, that each person can practice these instructions in accordance with their ability and what works best for them, what's helpful for them. And some people may want to just stay on the first part of the practice of being aware of the breath coming in and going out, and not move on to the other parts of the breath being long and short and so on. Maybe later, after some time, some months, or maybe some years of practicing just with the breath, then you might wish to incorporate the other instructions. So I think there isn't one fixed way to do these practices that everyone should do. It's up to you to find what works best for you. But meditation on the breath is actually quite profound. I read and heard statements given by the Buddha where he spoke about how this is, he himself would spend a lot of time practicing mindfulness of the breath. And also it said in some texts that practicing mindfulness of the breathing can take us all the way to enlightenment. I mean, you do add on other practices to these basic ones to be able to do that. But anyway, it just shows that it can be very profound, very beneficial. So we have been going through 4 qualities that were mentioned by the Buddha in the Satipatthana Sutra, that is the sutra on the establishments of mindfulness. These are 4 qualities that we should have when we do this practice. And in the book that you have, these start on the bottom of page 41. The first of the 4 qualities is ardency or enthusiasm. You need to have enthusiasm to do this practice. Not feel bored or think that we're doing it just because somebody is making us do it. But from our own side, we see the value, the benefit of doing the practice, and we are enthusiastic about doing it. And the second quality is vigilance, which is also translated as introspective awareness or clear comprehension. That's the way it's translated in the Pali tradition. And so that's the ability to be aware of what is happening in our body and mind, especially the mind. That's what we most need to pay attention to, so that we can detect the arisal of unhelpful or unskillful states of mind and deal with those, not just let our mind be carried away by them. But it also includes paying attention to our body, knowing what our body is doing. We're going to talk more about that a little later today. And the third quality is mindfulness, which is the mental factor that enables the mind to stay on the breath, remember the breath or whatever object we're meditating on, remembering that object, not losing it, not forgetting it, not wandering off to something else. So I've already explained those first 3 qualities, and now let's look at the 4th quality, which is on the top of page 42 in your book. The 4th quality is said to be being free from desires and discontent with regard to the world. So those are the actual words of the Buddha. And Joseph Goldstein in his book says that this refers to concentration, composure, and unification of mind. So this means that when our mind is free from desires and from discontent or unhappiness with regard to the world, then our mind naturally becomes concentrated. We have good concentration, composed, and unified, rather than scattered. So how can we understand this? One way is to just look at our own experience when we do try to meditate, even if we do a simple practice like focusing on the breathing. So in our experience, how long is our mind, our attention able to stay on the breath before other thoughts interfere and our mind can get distracted to them? So there could be internal distractions, our own thoughts and memories and fantasies and emotions and so on. So those pop up, arise in our mind, and then our mind can get caught up in and carried away by them. Or we could also get distracted by external things like noise, sounds. And so if we look at how our mind gets distracted, and analyze, why does this happen? What is the mental state that is happening such that our mind moves away from the meditation object to something else? We'll probably find that most of the time it's related to desire or attachment. For example, thinking about people, family members, friends, and so on. People we have attachment to. We're attached to those people, and so we're concerned about them. We like to think about them and maybe worry about them and remember past encounters, experiences we had with those people. And so this is, one way attachment arises towards people. But we also have attachment to other things, such as pleasurable objects, pleasurable experiences, like music, beautiful sounds, or things we have seen, beautiful scenery, sunsets, mountain scenery, and so forth, or movies that we've watched, food that we have eaten and enjoyed, and so on. So different kinds of sensory experiences that we may have had in the past, or we may not have had, but we would like to have them, and so we might start dreaming about them and fantasizing about them. And then other things that we can get attached to might be more abstract experiences, such as being successful, being liked by others, admired by others, known by others, having some kind of fame, some degree of being known, being famous, being recognized by others. So those are just some of the things that we can get attached to, and then thoughts about those objects come up in our mind when we're meditating, and then our mind gets caught up in thinking about those, and we wander away from our object. So that is an explanation of the phrase desires with regard to the world. Desires related to worldly objects or worldly experiences. But in other cases, our mind might be distracted due to discontent. For example, being unhappy about something another person has done. Yeah, somebody does something we don't like and we find annoying. We're unhappy about that, and that might come up in our meditation. We start thinking about that and chewing on it and getting more and more unhappy, more and more discontent, maybe even angry about it. So it could be another person, it could be something that's happening in our country, some kind of political problem that's going on, conflict, or something that's being discussed, something that's happening, or in the world. Not just our own country, but other countries as well. Something we heard about or read about in the news, and we're unhappy about it. And that thought comes up, and our mind can get caught up thinking about that and feeling more and more unhappy, more and more discontent. So, or another thing, with regard to our own body, at the moment, at the time we are meditating, there may be a sensation in our body, like being too hot or being too cold, or having an itch, or some kind of pain or ache. So we might notice that unpleasant experience in our body and be unhappy about that, discontent with that. Or maybe our seat is uncomfortable, too high or too low or too lumpy or whatever. And then our mind is thinking, oh, I don't like this, I don't want this, I want it to stop, I want it to change. So those are examples of discontent with regard to the world. So these kind of experiences that distract our mind boil down to two things: attachment and aversion, liking and disliking. So if we pay attention to our mind, we can see that it's very often, probably most of the time, caught up in those kind of attitudes. I like this, I don't like that. This is good, this is bad. And when this is happening, our mind is agitated, restless, doesn't stay on the object, gets distracted from the object. And so that makes it difficult to develop concentration and composure and so on. So we need to learn how to be free, as the Buddha said, be free from desires and discontent with regard to the world. Of course, that's not easy to do. We can't do it in a short period of time, even if we really, really want to. It takes time to be completely free of attachment and aversion, desire and discontent. But we can at least pay attention to our mind, notice when this is happening, and understand it's just a state of mind. It's just something happening in the mind. It's not permanent. And so we can put it aside, let go of it, and come back to our object, like the breath. So anyway, this fourth quality recommended by the Buddha is concentration, having the ability to stay focused and concentrated on the practice that we're doing. But it's not easy. It's very difficult. And you have probably heard instructions on how to develop calm abiding, or shamatha. This is found in the Tibetan tradition. And the full set of instructions is rather complicated. And it's really meant for someone who's able to go into retreat and stay in an isolated place, a peaceful place, and just focus on that kind of practice, cultivating calm abiding. Most of us are not in a position to be able to do that, at least now at the present. We have responsibilities, we have work to do, so we're not just able to cut ourselves off and go into long-term retreat. However, we can still work on increasing our concentration. For example, if we do a daily practice of meditation, even if it's just 5 minutes or 10 minutes, 15, whatever, during our practice of meditation, really trying our best to stay concentrated on the object, whether it's the breath or for contemplating some topic like love or compassion or emptiness, to really develop the ability to stay focused and bring our mind back to that object whenever it wanders away. We can also train our mind to be concentrated at other times. For example, when we're working. If you're a therapist and you're with a patient, then you do need to be present with your patient and really pay attention to what the person is saying and what they're doing, their body language and so on. So during that time with the patient, you have a chance to practice and train your mind in concentration. So in other words, we can use whatever opportunities present themselves in our daily life to train our mind in concentration. And then slowly it will increase, it will improve. And Joseph Goldstein also says, in order to have this state of mind of concentration, composure, and so on, we need to have ethics and non-harmfulness. So being able to have good concentration does depend on ethics, ethical conduct, which basically means living our life in such a way that we avoid doing things that are harmful, negative, non-virtuous, unethical, like killing and stealing and so forth, the 10 non-virtuous actions recommended by the Buddha to avoid. So trying as much as we can to refrain from non-virtuous actions. And then when we do make a mistake, we do commit some non-virtue, to do purification of it. Do purification to clear away that karma. And try to create virtue as much as we can. The actions that we do are virtuous and positive and beneficial. So that's basically what ethics is all about in Buddhism. Joseph Goldstein calls this kind of behavior skillful behavior, and says that without this as a basis, then the mind is filled with worry, regret, and agitation. We feel worried and agitated, maybe guilty, regretful about things that we have done, knowing that we didn't act wisely, we didn't act correctly, we acted in a harmful way, in a negative way. So then afterwards we're agitated about that. And then it's hard to concentrate. And he mentioned that one of his teachers, a Burmese master, it was his main teacher, Munindra, first teacher he learned from. This teacher said that if we try to practice meditation with the aim of attaining enlightenment, but we are not concerned about ethics, then it's like trying to row a boat across a river, and we're like rowing really, really hard, but the boat is still tied to the dock. And so we're not going to get anywhere, however much effort we make. We won't be able to move and get to our destination. So he said that's what happens if we try to meditate, even if you're practicing very hard, but if you don't pay attention to ethical conduct and have good ethics, then it's kind of like wasted effort. You won't get anywhere. So a good place to start with the practice of ethics is the 5 precepts. And in the Buddhist tradition, lay people can take any number of these 5 precepts as a promise, making an actual promise to keep them for life. If you don't have the opportunity to take the 5 precepts from a teacher, you can still try to live your life in accordance with these as much as you can, avoiding these 5 types of actions. And so the 5 precepts involve refraining from killing, and ideally not just human beings, but animals and insects as well. So trying to live in a completely non-harmful way, respecting all of life, all living beings. And then second one is stealing, which involves theft and robbery, but also things like not paying taxes or fees that we are supposed to pay. You may find a way out of paying those, but that's still stealing. And if you really think deeply about that behavior, you'll probably feel quite uncomfortable. And third is sexual misconduct, any kind of sexual behavior that is harmful, that causes suffering to others. And then lying, telling lies, false speech. So that's pretty self-explanatory how that leads to suffering. And then the 5th one is getting intoxicated, using alcohol, drugs, and so forth, because that causes the mind to become imbalanced, to lose mindfulness. And when the mind becomes intoxicated, it's quite easy to act out other kinds of harmful behavior that we wouldn't do when we are sober. So trying to avoid those actions as much as possible. And then as we become more mindful, our mindfulness grows, increases, improves, we'll probably start to notice other kinds of behavior that we might be doing or think about doing, have an impulse to do, that are harmful and aren't necessarily mentioned in the 5 precepts. For example, speaking hurtful words, speaking in a hurtful, harsh way to another person that hurts their feelings or upsets their mind. Or simply just acting in a rude and unfriendly way to another person. Some people are very sensitive and would feel hurt, would suffer as a result of behaving that way. So we can also become aware of this kind of behavior and work on decreasing those as much as possible, stopping those as much as we can. And then with further practice, further training in mindfulness, we'll become more aware of our thoughts, kind of talking that's going on in our mind, and how even our thoughts can sometimes be harmful or unethical. For example, being critical, seeing faults in others, being judgmental about what they do, why they do things, often just imputing or projecting what the motivation a person has for what they do. We could be completely wrong. We might be right, but it's also possible that we are wrong, that we misunderstand their reasons, their motivation for behaving that way. And yeah, just the whole quality of being critical and judgmental in the sense of like aversion, having aversion for the person and aversion for their way of behavior. So it's a kind of low-level anger. And another example would be jealousy, seeing someone who has more than we do, or is smarter than us, or better at something than us, and just finding that unbearable. I can't stand the fact that that person is better than me in whatever way. So jealousy is extremely painful. And similar to this is like resentment. If somebody is happy or doing well, being successful, learning a lot or whatever, and we feel resentful about that, and like, I wish they weren't quite so happy. I wish things were not going so well, because we may feel, oh, it makes me look bad, comparing ourselves with the other person. Then we feel inferior, we feel not as good, and we don't like feeling that way. We don't want that feeling. Okay, so that's a kind of jealousy, but maybe better to call it resentment about another person's happiness or success. So these are just some examples of thoughts or mental activity that can happen in our mind that is not wholesome, not positive, not really ethical. And so this is, as we practice more and train more, we become more and more aware of these more subtle types of negativity. And if we really are concerned about living ethically and about developing our practice of meditation, wanting to have better concentration, then it's good to really pay attention to these forms of negativity and work on stopping them, overcoming them. So the more we can stop ourselves from harmful behavior with our body and our speech and our mind, then the more our mind will become calm and able to focus, able to be concentrated, and also more happy, more joyful. You feel better about yourself in the way you're living your life when you are really doing the best you can to be ethical, to live ethically. Yeah, and so then with that state of mind that's more calm and happy and pure and positive, then it will be easier to stay focused on our meditation object. And Joseph Goldstein says, concentration also depends on having a continuity of mindfulness, being able to keep our mindfulness going in a continuous way. Now, realistically, we may not be able to do that all day long because we have things we have to do, different jobs, different activities, and often involving other people. And at those times, it's more difficult to have mindfulness, continuity of mindfulness. But we just do the best we can. We try to have as much mindfulness as we can in our daily life, and especially in our meditation, when we're doing meditation. And the teachings on calm abiding in the Tibetan tradition also talk about the importance of mindfulness. It's a necessary element to be able to develop calm abiding. It's what enables our mind to remember and stay focused on our meditation object, not forgetting it, wandering away and getting distracted. And also mindfulness of the instructions, what we're supposed to be doing in our practice of meditation. If we say, I want to develop calm abiding, we need to remember, what are the instructions? What is it we're supposed to do to develop concentration? We need to keep those in mind, be mindful of those, and use them when we are practicing. And it is important, although concentration is important in Buddhism, we need to understand it is not an end in itself. Some people in the world might think all you need to do is develop good concentration, and then that's it, that's enough. Yeah, just being able to stay focused, stay concentrated on an object for as long as you want, that's kind of an end in itself, a goal in itself. In Buddhism, it's not like that. Concentration is like a tool we develop, a mental tool, a mental ability we develop, and then we use concentration for other things, especially wisdom, mainly wisdom. We have to have very good concentration to be able to focus on an object, penetrate the layers of misconceptions we have about the object, and then see it as it is, realize it correctly as it is. The concentration is mainly needed to develop wisdom and then go on to attain the higher goals of liberation and enlightenment. So it is important, but it also takes time. It's not something easy, quick. So we do need patience and persistence. So anyway, that's the fourth of the four qualities that we ideally have when we're doing these practices of the establishments of mindfulness. And in the sutra, there's some other instructions that come in a verse or refrain, which is what Joseph calls it, that the Buddha repeats a number of times in the sutra with regard to each of the four practices of mindfulness, body, feelings, and so forth. And in these instructions, the Buddha is talking about how we actually generate insight or wisdom into the nature of things. So with regard to the body, I'll just read part of it now and explain it. So the Buddha says, in regard to the body, one abides contemplating the body internally, or one abides contemplating externally, or one abides contemplating both internally and externally. So there's three things there: internally, externally, and both. So internally refers to practicing mindfulness with regard to our own body, our own breathing, our own parts of the body or sensations in our body and so forth. Externally refers to others' bodies. So we are also meant to develop mindfulness with regard to the bodies of others. For example, their breathing. No, we need to make sure other people are breathing. If they stop breathing, then there's something to be concerned about there. But just being aware that others have bodies, and their bodies are breathing, and their bodies are in different postures and doing different things and so on. So externally then means paying attention to the bodies of others. And when we do this, we should try to do it without judging or reacting emotionally, like with attachment or aversion or jealousy, and try to avoid making up stories about people. You might notice your mind doing that. We may not even know a person and what they think, what they feel, but our mind can kind of fabricate stories about them, which are probably completely wrong, not true. So just bare attention, just having bare attention with regard to the bodies of others, and not letting our mind get carried away with those mental activities. And then both internally and externally, that's the third part, both. So one meaning of that is that we alternate. There are times when we pay attention to our own body, and other times when we pay attention to the bodies of others and practice mindfulness. Difficult to do both at the same time unless your mind is highly developed. You can have many objects at the same time, but and the time when we would be paying attention to our own body would be mainly during meditation. So during meditation, we ideally should have good mindfulness with regard to our own body. And when we're not meditating, when we're with other people, then we can expand our awareness and be mindful of their bodies as well. Another interpretation from Bhikkhu Analayo, who's done a lot of research into this practice of the 4 establishments of mindfulness, he said both internally and externally means contemplating experience without considering it to be mine or another's, but just experience. It seems like maybe a higher sense of awareness, and it makes me think of Shantideva. There's a place in Shantideva's text, I don't remember the exact words, but he's actually talking about compassion and having compassion for suffering, and questioning why are we more concerned about the suffering of this body and not the suffering of others' bodies. Suffering is suffering, and wherever suffering exists, we should alleviate it, whether it's my body or another's body. So I was thinking about that when I heard this or read this, that we're trying to go beyond this sharp division of me and others, us and them, I and others, but just, a more equanimous way of seeing bodies and what bodies are doing and what they're experiencing and so on. So anyway, it's good to know that that is part of the instructions. It's not only paying attention to our own body, our breathing, our postures, our actions, and so on, but also with regard to the bodies of others. That's also an object of mindfulness to be cultivated. Okay, so I'll just talk about one more thing before we finish. So there's different ways of practicing mindfulness with regard to the body. The first of these is breathing. So we've looked at that now. And within mindfulness of the breathing, there's different points. Just the breath itself, long or short, the breath in the context of the whole body, and then calming the body. So those are all practices with regard to the breathing. And so the next practice with regard to the body is mindfulness of bodily postures and bodily actions. So the Buddha, the words of the Buddha are, when walking, one knows I am walking. When standing, one knows I am standing. When sitting, one knows I am sitting. When lying down, one knows I am lying down. So this means we take our awareness of our body beyond just the meditation session when we're sitting and doing formal meditation, but we take it into other areas of our life, other ways in which we are using our body. And the Buddha specifically mentions these 4 different kind of postures: walking, sitting, standing, and lying down. Those are the 4 main situations that our body would be in. So Joseph Goldstein says doing this helps strengthen the continuity of our awareness, of our mindfulness. And it's not complicated. It's just a question of remembering to do it, training our mind to be in the present moment, knowing where our body is and what our body is doing. And I think it can happen sometimes that our body might start doing things on its own without being completely aware. One example that came to my mind, I've heard this from smokers, people who have the habit of smoking. They might be sitting at the computer working or watching a movie or whatever, so their attention is directed on that. And their body will pick up the packet of cigarettes, pull a cigarette out of a packet, put it in their mouth, light it, and start puffing on it before they even realize what they're doing. And it's almost like the body is acting on its own. So we may have had an experience like that, even if we're not a smoker, but with regard to something else, some way our body is just acting in an automatic way without our being aware of what our body is doing. So that's a lack of mindfulness. So we want to move away from that and learn to be mindful about what our body is doing. And you can probably see how important this is, especially when it comes to refraining from harmful actions. Yeah, it can happen sometimes our body will just do something harmful, like step on a bug, take away the life of another being before we even realize that we have done that. And so, yeah, slowly, we need to train ourselves to be aware of what our body is doing, mainly to ensure we're not doing anything harmful, unethical, negative. And instead, we keep our body in activities, postures and activities that are beneficial for others, non-harmful to others, conducive for the cultivation of positive states of mind, and so on. So this is your homework. You can be working on this. Just do it as much as you can during your day. Don't do it in a pressured way, but do it in a relaxed way. But just really try to cultivate this awareness of your bodily postures and bodily actions. Okay, and again, if you have questions, you can send them in. I'll incorporate the answers in my talk next week. So let's finish by making a mental dedication of the positive energy we have created during this class, doing meditation, listening, learning, something that's beneficial for us. We wish it to be beneficial for others as well. So let's dedicate the positive energy to the welfare of all living beings. May it bring them peace, happiness, help them cultivate positive qualities and achieve greater and greater forms of happiness. Okay, thank you.